Hello, and welcome to the Sacred Heart Shaman podcast, where we talk about spiritual healing, shamanic wisdom, and the challenges of walking the healer's path. My name is Nadia Harenkiu, and today is episode number 20, Identifying Spiritual Gifts, Stories from a Shaman's Journey. Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the podcast today. We are talking about one of my favorite things, which is gifts and abilities that I see in other people. Part of my job as a shaman is to help people remember who they are and remember why they're here, what their life purpose is, and discover the medicine that they have to share with the world. And so I help individuals unblock whatever prevents them from seeing those things or being able to embody those things. I mentor them through practices that will help them on this path and learning new concepts that they need to learn in order to open up number of those gifts and abilities. And it's by far the most fun and joyful part of my job. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the kinds of gifts and abilities that I see. And I'm just pulling off of my most recent examples. Honestly, there's hundreds and it's so much fun. And I think I'm going to start keeping track so that I can share it with you guys. So when I start working with a person, sometime I can see their medicine right away. And it's super clear, and I know who they are and why they're here. And sometimes I'm allowed to share it, and sometimes I'm not. Other times I can see just what they have to clear first. So if they have a number of, we'll call them homework assignments that the spirits are telling them they need to do before they can have access to their life purpose or their abilities, I can see those things first. And they give me a spiritual prescription, like this person needs to start this specific type of medication. They need to read this specific book. They need to be exposed to this specific concept. And I'll kind of get a list of the things that are standing in the way of being able to identify life purpose and abilities. And then on the rare occasion, it actually takes me years to see a person's medicine. And I find that to be most common with people who have a lot of protection mechanisms in place, usually very highly magical people who have protection for one reason or another, or they have abilities in them that I also have in myself that I'm not ready to uncover. In those cases, it might take a little bit longer for me to see the medicine that they carry. So, in terms of being able to have access to those abilities or information about life purpose, there's a few things that I commonly see or hear from the spirits that need to be cleared first. Now, this isn't the case always, but I'm just going to share the most common ones. So, a lot of times people are not able to learn or embody their abilities fully if their heart is not open. They won't have full access to their magic because their magic can be very, very damaging to themselves or to the collective. And so they're literally not allowed to have it until their heart is cleared out. It's kind of like a purity of heart thing. Sometimes they need to heal a specific amount of childhood trauma because it's actually their child version that holds the abilities that they need in order to embark on the journey of life purpose. Sometimes it's ancestral trauma because there's something unresolved in the bloodline and our magic is tied to the bloodline. Um, a few times I have encountered people where the spirits tell me that they need to be more humble, that their ego is too big. And when we have really profound abilities and a really big ego, it's a recipe for a lot of damage. So that can be a big one too. And then occasionally people just still have lessons that they need to move through. It looks like a existential, like a high level Rubik's Cube where certain pieces need to fall into place before we can reveal the part that shows us our abilities or our life purpose. So, today I'm going to share a couple very specific examples of people that I've worked with and the kind of medicine that they carry. My first example is a woman who has the medicine of resurrection. I had never seen this before. It was the coolest thing. It was very like Skeletor, um, risen from the dead, and found out a little bit about this medicine. And you do actually have the ability to bring things back from the dead. And that doesn't necessarily mean tangibly in the 3D, but think about the parts of us that die, or the things that die around us, or the collective things that die. The ability to pop them back into existence is something that she carries. I've only seen this once. With some abilities, I have actually seen them a couple different times, and people carry them in different ways. But the magic or medicine of resurrection is something I've only seen one time. And so I don't know intricately how it works, but I'm sure that the next person I work with who has this medicine, I will be taught more about it. Often my job is it's to help people with honing their medicine and bringing it to the world, but it's a very reciprocating job. So I often get to learn something far beyond what books could ever teach me or even a mentor. And then in rare cases, I also get that ability for myself to some extent. Um, and then thus allowing me to help even more people. It's really cool. The second person I want to share is a woman who energetically feels like a solid rock. She, hands down, had one of the top three worst childhoods I've ever heard. Oftentimes, when she told me stories, I would have nightmares about it and I would think about it for weeks afterwards and just send this inner child as much love as I could. And I actually saw that she needed to go through this childhood to become this rock so that she could be super strong, but also super bright light to help others on a totally different level than other people could help them. So she was also a trauma nurse, which meant she worked in like, pretty high stress situations. Um, Also did some work around the world doing those like, Doctors with Borders kind of thing. And she touched so many lives. And the only way she could have done that was to be molded into this, we'll call it a hard rock because that's what I saw, um, but really strong, strong individual. Now, don't get me wrong. When I describe her as a hard rock, I do not mean that there's no softness and there's no tenderness, because there absolutely was. And there was also so much light. But she had this ability of exuding incredible amounts of strength so that people could draw on her in their moments of crisis, so that she could work in that environment for a prolonged period of time and help a lot of people. It was a very cool medicine. My next person, who is one of my good friends, the first time that I sat in ceremony with her, I saw that she was royalty in the Fae realm. So when I say royalty, I mean it's like the kind of person who oversees like the caretaking and jobs of many, many, many other beings. And she was like queen. She was queen of the Fae. Now, I have heard stories of the Fae, of course, we all have, but I never saw their true form until I worked with this woman. And let me tell you, their true form is not what what most people think it is, which leads me to believe that most people have never seen them. I find that you have to be, well, through working with this woman, I learned um, by working in proximity with the Fae that you actually have to have a very, very pure heart in order to have access to that realm. And if you don't, they appear in other ways that's like not their true form. And that's kind of the indicator for me of whether or not a person has actually interacted with the Fae, is by the way they describe them. So she was some kind of royalty, and the first time that I saw her true form, I cried for like 5 hours because she was so beautiful. She was so beautiful. Um, so I'm not really sure, like, what this quote unquote, means exactly, but I can tell you that her medicine is very, very sweet, very loving, very tender, very heart opening, and she has just so many gifts that she shares with the world. And when you work with her, it does make your heart more tender. It does open it up a little bit more. And so it's a very soft and gentle medicine that ripples. It's extremely feminine medicine, which is wonderful because she's a body worker and a sound healer and a few other things. And yeah, her medicine is really quite something. I worked with a man at one point. I had him on my table and I saw that he had the ability to transmute matter. And that ability was not going to come in for 5 or 6 years because our dimension could not yet handle it. And he had so much work to do in himself first, but that he would have the ability to turn solids into gas or liquid. And like, guys, that blew my damn mind. That is some ancient alien stuff right there. So I saw that he would have this ability. I saw what it was going to look like. I saw what it was going to feel like. Very ET vibration, right? Which we all know we are headed towards a very multidimensionality vibration here on Earth. And it does not surprise me that that's coming into our field. But yet, it was the first time that I felt hope in such a long time. So this person has some shamanic background, but he still has a lot of work to do on himself. And I was allowed to tell him that he had these gifts, but also gave him very specific instructions that he has to follow for the next 5 years in order to have access to these gifts. Because that is one of the things that, if in the wrong hands or in the hands of someone who wasn't really doing their work, could be extremely dangerous to the entire dimension, as you could imagine. My next person is a person who is a giant hybrid. His energy was so big and so incredible that he could bring destruction to the entire world. And it would force us to build a new paradigm. And I don't mean this in like a scary, like I'm going to kill off humanity sort of way, but in a deconstruction of the current paradigms that are not working. So he had a lot of darkness around him. One of the times that I saw him in spirit, he showed up as Lucifer, which is like a whole other side tangent. I do not believe that that's a bad thing at all, and would love to have conversations about what demons actually are and Lucifer and all that, angels. Um, and he comes from a lot of trauma professionally. And so death and destruction on that level is something I've never seen before. And as I've talked about before in the podcast, death and destruction are not bad things. They are things that we need constantly. And we're doing a little bit of too much of preventing things from dying, which is actually causing more problems, keeping things alive that need to go in order for new things to usher in. So, this man, I can see that when harnessed from the heart, he could actually help rip the paradigm apart and build anew. And as I know, many of us may have like fears or nightmares, sometimes even joke about apocalypse coming. But the truth is, sometimes things really do need to be ripped apart to that level in order to be rebuilt. Um, but I think if we did it on purpose, we wouldn't have to. So seeing this in this man was really freaking cool. I've never worked with a man who had that much power behind him. And the key to accessing it is going to be through opening the heart and embracing love first. Or else he's going to self-destruct. And I could see that he would go down a path of suicide if he did not answer the call or he allowed the darkness to take over. Um, I have another woman who embodies the most intense goddess energy. And when I'm with her in spirit, she looks about 15 feet tall. She's absolutely magnificent. Like, you think Avatar, but as a giant and with a little bit of muscle. So she embodies really big goddess energy. And goddess energy is really unique because it triggers things inside of other people, right? So There's a lot of feminine stuff there, stories and history and mythology, and there's a lot of like preconceived notions about it by both men and women. And so just being in proximity of her triggers healing within yourself. So it's not even something that she has to do, she just has to exist. And that's really the bottom line with all of these people I'm talking about. Like, you don't always have to be doing something with your medicine. About 30 to 40% of the time, you simply need to exist, and having your medicine in the world and channeled through you in whatever way it wants to come through is all that's needed. I joke sometimes that like the barista at Starbucks can actually do more healing work than I can, and that's absolutely true. If that's a true calling and it radiates your heart and you touch hundreds of people per day, you are actually going to have an impact on the world. So it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about gifts and abilities in medicine. Like, it's not always going to look like mine. It's not always going to look like an energy healer or a therapist or a doctor. Sometimes it's just existing and being you fully in the world. Um, yeah, so I don't know, just a thing I felt like I needed to say. The last, oh, it's not the last. The next person I want to talk about is a man who wrangles demons. So he's like a threshold to the underworld. So when he works with clients, I literally see him like opening up the gates to the underworld and holding them open so people can go into their lower world and do work there, so things can come out of the lower world and be resolved or witnessed. It's really interesting. And he even has the ability to sing and play music. And I've watched in like a ceremony space with me, my job is often to kind of lure demons out or shadows out into the light. And then he wrangles them with his music and then like kind of lulls them. And then we transmute them. We send them home. We send them love. It's something that just happens automatically. It's not even something that's done on purpose. It's a really cool ability. It also makes him a pretty intense individual, like in the day to day, but also when he's holding space. So, another person that I worked with carried really intense insanity energy. Um, that's a thing because it helps other people question their reality so that they can be more firm in themselves, who they are, and what they believe. So, insanity is actually a medicine. It's not the most fun to carry or to experience as a third party, but it definitely does have its place. There is another gal that I work with who can connect to galaxies that are really far away. And she's a space holder. So when she holds space, she connects you to those other galaxies too. So it's like an attunement or a connection by proxy. She really just needs to show up and do her work. And by holding space for other people, she helps connect those other people to places that are very far away that we often cannot connect to unless we have a bridge to help us connect there. During COVID, I was working with a man during a ceremony process, and his job was to usher people out of the dimension via exit ramps. And so these were people who couldn't change with the dimension, who were unwilling to let go, who had chosen the path to die. And those of us who were ready to move on, he would help get off the exit ramp so they could get to where they were going, so they wouldn't get left behind. And he had like this big vision of it, how he was helping ushering people off into the new dimension. Because COVID is a whole conversation. It is not what we think it was. The purpose was very interesting. What was actually going down collectively was very interesting. And there was like a whole dimension shift. And I had many clients during that time who had experiences and visions about their role during COVID that was like not, it was not normal level stuff. Um, and so this was one, and during the experience, he had me writing down people's names. Like this person, like, don't try to get them to go. They're not ready to go forward. You have to leave them behind. Don't try to convince them. This one needs a little bit of convincing. Don't let this one go alone. Like, just really specific information. It was really cool. I have another gentleman who is a wizard. I don't even know what that means, but I know that he has very specific medicine that involves like casting spells. The whole topic of casting spells versus working with the universe and God is a whole separate conversation, definitely for another day. But this man has the ability to do that. He is wizard in every way, shape, or form, and he's the only one I've ever met. So I don't have a whole lot of information about them. But I do know that a big part of his role in the world is doing wizard like things. And so I invite you to use your imagination. And the last person that I want to share about was very connected to extraterrestrial. She was able to pull energy from other dimensions and shoot it into our dimension from very far away. So she acted like it was like a Spider-Man conduit. Like it just kind of came out of her into the places where it needed to go. It was very precise, very, very high vibration. And so she was really connected to both places, but she had a very hard time holding the human form, which led into some psychosis issues and other complications, which is honestly pretty common with people who are super connected to extraterrestrials. You have to be really careful in how you work with that medicine and how you channel it into the dimension because it's easy to lose your footing. It's easy to not do some of like the more challenging shadow work. They're often more likely to have like physical issues because pain helps keep them in their body, which helps them keep them on Earth. So it's like a whole thing. So these are a couple examples of different abilities and medicines that I see in my clients and in my friends. And aside from what I've mentioned so far, another thing that I want to say is that the bigger the call, the harder it is to answer it. So, if your medicine is really big, if it's really complex, if it's really earth changing kind of medicine, it's going to be a lot harder to say yes. There's going to be a lot more fear, a lot more resistance, a lot more confusion around, well, God, how do I do this? I can feel the weight of my calling, I can feel the complexity. Maybe you can even feel the darkness of it, of the unknown or of the shadow pieces. And it does make it harder to answer the call, which is why, having somebody to talk to about it, having a mentor, finding the people like you is so important because we really do need to answer these calls. We do need to embody our medicine. We need to embody our true form, our like most natural, authentic self. We need to be pursuing our life purpose. I mean, that's why we're here. And we're not going to feel satisfied or fulfilled if we ever settle for anything less. So, this is an important conversation. It's my favorite thing to do to help people identify what their gifts are and what their life purpose is, because there's nothing more satisfying than being aligned with yourself and having an open heart and feeling fulfilled. Like, what's the point if we can't feel that while we're here on Earth? It just seems like a waste of time otherwise. So, thank you for joining me on this podcast today. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to know more about me and my work, you can find me at www.sacredheartshaman.com.